Dive into the world of data center innovation with the iMasons podcast, discovering the people leading the industry revolution. My name is Romain Tranchant, and today I am joined by Schilling, CEO of Tropical IT, and Andrew Jones, EVP of Sales. Tropical IT is a technology procurement and supply partner helping global enterprise simplify how technology is sourced, delivered, and deployed across the Americas. We will have a conversations on why the future infrastructure procurement depends on rethinking supply chains as intelligent, responsive supply flows rather than fragmented transactional systems that the industry keeps pretending are fine. Let's get right into it. Luis, Andrew, thank you very much for taking the time today and coming and talking to us about supply chain. I believe this is the first time we're really going to deep dive into the world of supply chains in data centers and the reality of it and what can be done about some of the constraints that we've seen in the recent years. But before we get into this, I'd love for both of you to introduce yourselves to our audience so they get to know you better.
Very good. Thank you, Romain, for having us. I'm Schilling. I'm the founder and CEO of Tropical IT. I've been an entrepreneur in this industry for something around 14 years now. And I'm originally from Argentina, currently enjoying a sunny day in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, thanks, Romain. Excited to have a conversation today. My name is Andrew Jones, and I'm responsible for our sales and marketing here at Tropical IT. Been in the industry for about 20 years across a few global VARs, and excited to have the conversation.
So there is no better way but to dive straight into the topic. Supply chain has been at the center of a number of issues. We're generally hearing about the amount of delays that we get to procure a number of elements. And it's not the only one. We know that people and power are also the other two biggest constraints that we see. So why do you believe supply chain is one that we should be rethinking most urgently?
So, unlike power or talent, supply chain is a global problem. When you are looking for power, you can go outside of the U.S. and you'll find it. If you're looking for people, you can go to Mexico and find thousands of electrical engineers and sponsor them to come and live in the US, give them a better opportunity and have them work for you and build your AI factories, right? So people and power are problems that I believe are more related to not going out there and finding them. I think that supply chain is just an issue that you cannot find solutions elsewhere. You just can't find inventory. So we are at a time that inventory is king. And I think that the balance is going towards the vendor right now. The power is going towards the vendor. Whoever has the inventory is also having the ability to choose who to do business with, which in my mind is crazy. I've never seen a time like this before. So very, very interesting times we're living in.
So when we look at why the supply chain is that strained, we generally start blaming demand for it, the vastness of the number of data centers that are being constructed, the size and the scale of those data centers. But is there a risk of missing something when we actually frame it in a way that only demand is the thing that is breaking supply chain?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the demand, of course, there's increased demand, but we've seen that across every industry. As you know, we've had innovation happen as we've had these new markets come online. So having aggressively new, higher demand isn't something that's new to any of these manufacturers. The biggest challenge for me is it was, I would say, structurally inefficient before this demand. So when you looked at supply chain previously, there were so many steps to get hardware into different locations. There were too many steps between the end user and the manufacturer. So as each end user went through 5, 10, 20, depending on how many countries they're in, maybe up to 50 different suppliers. Of course, you're never going to get that consolidated demand up to the manufacturer. So when you have so many different people asking for the same hardware, I think initially a lot of the manufacturers looked at it and said, well, this must all be for the same project, right? This is just a lot of people bidding on the same project, as opposed to, no, we're really trying to grow this. So when we look at it, too many people in the supply chain, and there's too many people involved that need some consolidation that happens there to help. So if we take away a lot of those initial inefficiencies and build a better process, build better communication, build a more streamlined way to get hardware where it's needed and not just where somebody wants it to store until they have the perfect client to sell it to, we would be able to match the demand with hardware that's available today, as opposed to just waiting for that, that perfect chip to come online in 6 to 9 months.
It's interesting that you mentioned that disconnect between the actual place where the hardware is going versus the actual manufacturers. I mean, we never really think about the manufacturing. We just think about like picking something up off the shelf. And when we first actually started talking about what you do, one of the terms that you coined was actually the term supply flow. Can you explain maybe what this changes when you look at the system through that lens of a flow rather than a chain?
I love that expression. It's a joke we tell internally. We're trying to change supply chain for supply flow. And when we think about supply chain, we imagine like a giant boat chain. And it just has such a negative image. It's like this idea that supply needs to be this heavy to lift chain versus continuous flow. That's kind of the vision that we're trying to bring to the table. Is this should be smoother. That's the word. This should be smoother. This should be an oiled machine. And instead of that, we have a lot of steps, as Andrew was saying, but many of those steps were designed many years ago and for important reasons, right? It's not that red tape is not there for a reason, but the world has been changing a lot and control methods are stronger than ever right now. So having to continue using the same purchasing procurement methodologies that have been in place for the past 30 years, it's just keeping us at the same speed that we were growing 30 years ago. And now the industry has changed, has shifted. So new methods should be implemented. So when we're talking about supply flow, we're trying to build the ability for our systems to work together instead of being separate entities, right? When we talk to our customers and we are bringing our platform into their platforms, and our platforms can communicate with each other, the value that we see is that we're eliminating some barriers. And I think to get to that level of trust with a customer is very, very hard. But once you get there, you start seeing the supply flow instead of the supply chain. But I really love that phrase.
It's a very interesting one, and it really reminded me of what we see with the likes of B2C online merchants, where you really have a feel that is very effortless, and it just in contrast really brings the fact that B2B purchasing of infrastructure is still very complex, it's still very high risk. There's a lot of things going in, and there is a lot of actors in the path between the manufacturers and the end location of an asset. So could you maybe take us in a bit more details where the technology can generally remove friction, and maybe where human still needs to stay central to that process? Because I imagine this is not a pure technology left on its own.
Absolutely. We want to augment with technology to, accelerate ideas, accelerate transparency, knowledge, all of that, right? But there still is definitely the human element. I know you mentioned the B2C side of it. When you look at going online, right, and you want to buy, we laugh, but it's about a toothbrush, right? So I can go buy a $2 toothbrush online, and the minute I buy it, I get an estimate of when it's going to show up. I get a notification when it leaves the warehouse. I get tracking the whole way. And I get notified when it's 3 stops away. And that can show up same day, next day, 2 days, right? Depending on what service I choose. And when you look at the B2B side right now, with how everything is set up, as Louis said, there were a lot of structure, a lot of guidelines in place that have been there for 30 plus years, that add a lot of that timing that we're trying to replace with the technology side. So if you're taking hardware currently and you want to buy it for inside, say, Latin America, it goes through so many steps to get to you that there is no tracking. And typically it just shows up on your doorstep, right? Somebody, the truck backs in and says, hey, I have a delivery, and you're not ready with your team to accept it potentially. You're not ready for the installation of it. So now your whole timeline is pushed back because you weren't ready to accept. So with the technology aspect, what we're trying to do is add that visibility and transparency to the entire process, so our clients know what to expect, no matter where the hardware is sourced from. So for us, that could be sourcing from something, in the US, which still has probably the strongest stock of equipment, but that could be sourcing from anywhere in the world, right? And taking it to where they need it. And being transparent about where it is in the process, what that flow looks like, what they can expect. Especially as we have more and more customers moving towards, edge locations and things like that. You're not going to take, say, a few truckloads of hardware delivery at a single data center location. You may have to spread this out now between 5, 10, 20, 30 sites inside a country. And so when you look at that, without the visibility, without automating some of that workflow, you're really not going to know where that lives. And it creates a lot of bottlenecks for our clients, and slows the whole process down. So we definitely always still see the need for humans inside there. We're always going to have the conversations around proper expectations, around demand forecasting, around where things can come from, and setting the right timeframes. And there's so many people involved now on the client side. When people are building these AI factories, this is their core business now. This is a large revenue generating piece of their business, and without that visibility, it can cost real dollars to them in what they're able to stand up and provide and make revenue off of.
We very much see in the market today through different aspects that actually speed is becoming just a fundamental demand. Just like we used to ask, collocation, number of racks and power, and now we go like, when can I get it? It's no longer, it's such a big thing. It's almost the first thing to tell you they don't tell you what they want, they tell you when they want it.
Yes.
And I just wanted to come back on that. How does that become a very much a competitive advantage? Because we see that through the chain. We go from the request to the quote to the delivery to the installation. Why does responsiveness matter so much in this market?
I would say that this comes from way before the whole AI infrastructure madness era that we're living in right now. And I believe that the reason is just how people are getting measured and how people are getting paid. So when you're looking at a buyer's agenda or their inbox, their email, they generally operate on tickets, and they are measured on how fast can they close a ticket. And if you look at the entire workflow, instead of sitting on my vendor chair and saying, okay, yeah, I got this quote by this time, I got the PO by this time, and now I'm counting my SLA from the PO to the delivery date, we try to get ahead of the curve and actually think about their process instead. Their process is they get a ticket, they have to do a lot of internal approvals before they send an RFQ, or they can sometimes send it directly to ABC vendors. Once they do that process, they have to compare them and make sure they have apples to apples. Now they have to make a buying decision. Now they have to wait for finance to approve the PO and the funds. Now they sent the PO, and now you're counting the vendor's lead time. But before that, I don't know, maybe you can have the same amount of time that the vendor lead time was. So some companies don't realize this and are not paying attention to the previous part. We believe that we can bring a lot of time savings, and that's our way of saving our customers time, is focusing on the first part. Can we give you quotes in seconds instead of taking days, sometimes weeks? Can we help you with the structure of the quote being completely polished and structured the way you requested it, so that you can have an easier time comparing apples to apples? And this is a little hint, but when they are worried, and right now AI infrastructure is the case, when they are worried to turn on the money printing machine, as fast as possible, sometimes giving them a quote in seconds has so much more advantage than giving them even a 2 or 3 point discounted quote, but taking 3 or 4 days to give that quote. And the reason is, it's like, save me days, and I'm actually turning on that money printing machine sooner. And that 2 or 3% might not be worth waiting for. So that's how we see that speed can help us gain more business. And we've actually seen it in our numbers. It's like we have closing rates that are completely above industry standards just for our speed of quotes.
And talking about being able to quote on exactly what the customer wants will require a vast amount of data. And I assume that data is already somewhere, probably in spreadsheets, Word documents, and databases of all shapes and forms. So I just want to understand, you're talking about putting a platform, you're talking about optimizing for that first part. So why do you think that people that already sits on that kind of data maybe are not making efficient use of it and effective use of it? And maybe what are they missing? What's the things that actually makes that data a lot more valuable if they want to reach supply flow as opposed to supply chain?
I think this industry, and I would say procurement, supply chain in general, has typically been a very reactive type of engagement. So the business has a need. The business generates, like Louis said, a ticket internally that says, "Hey, I need A, B, and C hardware in this location," and then that team goes out to find that and source that. So there's not been this analysis of what they've maybe historically done, and that could be and for where they're going, and that could be for a few different reasons. One, I mean, this industry has a lot of moving parts in terms of people, right? People jump around a lot from from different companies to company to advance their career and have better opportunities. Move locations, things like that. And I think a lot of that process starts over when somebody new comes in. And so a lot of the data that's there is kind of not gone through, not looked at again. And there's a lot of manual spreadsheets, right? So I can't tell you how many times you've seen the quote that was manually generated coming through, an Excel sheet and sent over. And there's a time and a place for all of that, right? But having all of that knowledge, right? So you've been doing quoting for 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. There are tools out there, especially in the world that we live in today, that can really help automate and go through and do an analysis and a deep dive on that, so that you can see better trends, you can see better signals. And when we say supply flow, right, like there's obviously every month isn't the same, so you can see where those curves are, where those patterns are, and it's not you individually having to go sift through 50 to 1,000 quotes or quote requests to figure out what people are actually asking for. So by being able to go over that and have that data set and have that information, we can now provide a lot more proactiveness in the sense of finding hardware that's potentially needed coming up, wherever it's able to be found across the world. Maybe that means we need to pre-buy a large set of infrastructure needs for somebody, because we know that their cycle says in 90 days they're going to need to deploy X number of servers or pallets, whatever this looks like, and the manufacturer can't build it fast enough if we wait another 8 weeks when the request actually comes in. So I think being able to identify those trends is easier now than it's ever been in our system. And so being able to come through with that technology, with that analysis, lets us build a better platform so that we can predict what our clients are going to need when they need it, for better forecasting.
When we started talking about tropical IT, what I found fascinating is, and that's what we put in the intro, you cover the Americas, and you're literally covering North and South America. We're going to take a bit of a turn on that podcast. We're going to depart a little bit from supply chain and talk a bit more about South America as a market. I would love to spend a bit of time talking about Latin America and maybe the misunderstanding on the market. Is there any assumptions that people have about the market that maybe we need to clarify today based on your understanding? I know, Louis, you're from you're from the region, so maybe you have a good view and a good understanding of how the South American market works.
Very good. I would say they are well-deserved assumptions, and some other ones that are not so well-deserved. But yeah, the region has a perception of complexity, and in many cases it's a correct and accurate perception, and in many cases it's not. When it comes to, and this is my first suggestion is, to everyone out there is go travel, go see it for yourselves. Go and grab a coffee in Buenos Aires. Go and get tacos in Mexico City, right? In Mexico City. Go to go to Sao Paulo, understand the magnitude of that city. Um, Latin America is very special because it's culturally broad, and it's very special because of the talent that it holds. It does hold a lot of talent in our space specifically. Um, so I would say that the perceptions, some of them, as I mentioned, properly earned. The perceptions of being a place where business cannot take place. That's a very incorrect perception. And what I want to encourage is early movers have an advantage. There's a region with power, there's a region with talent, there's a region with a lot of intentions to do business with this industry, and there's also a region that has matured a lot by seeing the development of this industry. Saying that, it's like there have been regulation changes in Brazil and in Argentina, the most challenging countries in the region, to incentive this type of investments, AI infrastructure investments. Paraguay has been heard in every corridor, in every event that I've attended to in the past year and a half. And the crazy thing is that also the power is clean. So if you go to Brazil, Brazil is very green. Uruguay is very green. Paraguay is very green. You're talking about countries that have excess energy, and they are exporting energy to their neighbor countries. It's very interesting. This is all public information. It's available there in the market. So I'll be more than happy to continue conversations and to try to kill some of the myths that are out there in the region. When you think about why do these regions are so expensive when it comes to duties and taxes, well, that's kind of a political approach, more of the protectionist approach. But when it comes to AI, those regulations are helping that are helping those duties and taxes go down significantly. Um, very it's a region I love, so I try to be as objective as I can because I've been living in the US for 10 years, so I can have both points of view. And I can tell you there's a lot out there that's more on the fear side than on the reality side. So again, I encourage people, go travel, go see it for yourselves, go have a good time, enjoy spending time in Argentina, spending time in Mexico, and enjoy the culture and learn about the people that are surrounding you. And you're going to find out how smart they are, how trained they are, how very well educated, very strong engineers. Becoming an engineer in Argentina is much harder than becoming an engineer in the US. If you just compare the engineering programs of both countries, you're going to find out how hard it is to become an engineer. That's why the graduation rates of engineers in the US are much higher than they are in Argentina. That's a quick example. But yeah, I guess that's my answer to the to the perceptions that's out there of Latin America.
It's such an interesting one, and a great invitation to actually go and discover by ourselves how well, first of all, the countries are, but also the key points in the market, and actually talking about assumptions, right? We might make some assumptions about a market, but I'd love for our listeners to actually have a key takeaway moment as we're closing off this wonderful podcast. What are the things? What's the one assumptions you'd want infrastructure leaders to depart with, the ones that they have today that you believe is actually holding them back, based on the discussion we've just had?
I think for me, it's really that it doesn't have to be hard to do business throughout Latin America if you work through the right channels, right? We fully understand if clients are going through the existing supply chain methods, they're going to put in an excessive amount of time for what that currently represents in their workflow. So they might have to spend, 30, 40% of their time, and it's only maybe 10% of their overall portfolio. And so, that assumption of it's going to take a lot of time, it's inefficient, there's no transparency. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's what we are trying to change in that philosophy. So by bringing transparency, by bringing efficiencies, we feel we cut that time commitment down, and bring a lot more visibility and make it easier to do business throughout the region.
Luis, Andrew, thank you so much for coming in and discussing supply chain and South American market with us on this podcast. It's been a real pleasure for me to learn more about what you do, something that's quite close to my heart too, around the supply chain element. And I'm pretty sure many of our listeners will really enjoy discovering this, and I'm sure that they will want to reach out. So for those of you who do a quick Google search for Tropical IT, will lead you straight onto the website. A LinkedIn search will certainly actually lead you onto both our guest profiles today. In the meantime, as we know, we've got a few listeners that want to continue being part of iMasons. If you want to go and attend any of the events that we have organized, please follow the link that we've got here on the screen. If you're listening to the podcast today, imasons.org/events. And if you've got any questions, want to be featured on a podcast, or simply want to better understand what innovation means for iMasons, you can reach to us at innovation@innovations.org, and as per the email displayed on the screen. On that note, gentlemen, thank you again very much for joining us on the podcast today. And I'm pretty sure this is not the last time we'll hear about Tropical IT in the coming months and years. Thank you.
Thank you, Romain. Thank you so much for the time.
Take care.